I wanted to do a little piece on ways that you can use visual cues to construct spice blends. So we've talked about, I've talked a lot about taste before, but I want to talk a little bit more about that visual, the visual indicators, because they tell you an enormous amount. Okay, so what we're looking at here, I'll take these out. I'm going to give you a couple of cues first. So salts. As a category, salts are a little bit obvious because we all know what salt looks like. But when I look at salt like this, what I see is the bleached out colour in them. So the contrast that speaks to the way, the way in which they project flavour. Earth spices. They look earthy, seedy, earthy colourways. Visual indicator. Warm spices. They speak to warmth and density. You can see that from the colour and from the textures of the powders if you get close enough. Hot category spices, it looks like flame and hot rock. Very visual in terms of what they're giving you. Structural category spice, so whole spices. Garam masala in the middle, but you can see obviously they're whole, and that wholeness creates a more impactful, charismatic flavour. They're more structural. Bitter and astringent. Contrasting. And pale in colour. Bitter spices, astringent spices. So just really to totally simply deconstruct it, because I know a lot of people use ground spices when they're cooking Indian food. So salt, ground cumin, ground coriander, you might use turmeric, you're probably going to use ground ginger, and you'll use a powdered chilli. Okay, you see that? Now it's all, even though there is a colour differential, of course, so you're going to find that that's actually really pretty flavour. But if you wanted to make more interest, a contrast to powder is texture. So suddenly you pop in a seedy spice, a whole spice, and a fresh spice like ginger, and you've accelerated the contrast. Okay, one. We'll do it a little differently. So we'll start again. So you've got your salt, fenugreek, chilli, mustard seeds. Say you're following a recipe. Let's get a fresh ginger here. And maybe you'd say you'd use an onion or something as well, because often people do in Indian cooking when they're not quite sure what to do. Okay, so you've got this little cluster of spices. What you're looking at is something that's very pale with a little bit of strong contrast in there, chili. That's going to be very hard. Whenever you've got white spice, so ginger, garlic, white salt, mustard seed, fenugreek powder, it's astringent and it's driving. White with spice is generally an indicator of a stripping quality. So if I was to soften that, then I would add in a little bit of a softer palette. This is beautiful, it's very jazzy. White equals jazzy flavour. But if you wanted to create a bit of softness, you might do an aniseed powder, a second bitter with some turmeric, a little cassia powder. And just so that you've got a little bit of extra texture to match in, some bay leaf. So suddenly you can see that that line of white has become, you know, at the back you've got this triangle of warmth and depth and tonal variation that is going to create a different tier structure visually into the base of your masala. So I understand that this language seems very sophisticated, but getting used to, when you have a recipe, laying your aromatics out so you can see what it looks like visually before you cook it, to taste the spices as you're heating them and cooking them, and then to taste the end result of the dish. And building your knowledge that way really is exactly that. It's a way to build your knowledge step by step that encompasses more than just the idea that flavour will tell you everything. So the more that you can bring in, you know, sight, textural elements, you know, of course, aromatic properties and understanding some of the function. Sight, touch, taste, smell, all of those things when you're starting a dish are really powerful ways to increase your own personal wisdom and intuition around cooking. Intuitive cooking only happens or only becomes a possibility when we spend time inputting information into our sensory bodies in sensory ways, because intuition, by virtue of what it is anti-intellectual. And so understanding some of the intellectual capacity of spice, of course, is super important. But to really get to a space where you're free-forming, you've got to begin to reach into sensory descriptors and start educating your own self in a language that you understand about the way aromatics operate. Visual cues are an enormous help.